Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our virtual choices. We're sorry it had to be this way because of the pandemic and just the craziness of this semester. I am Morgan. I'm one of the graduate assistants for health promotion along with Rachel. And we are going to go through the choices program a little differently. And you guys should have a little assignment that you can fill out going along with this, and you can turn it into your learning community leader or however they told you to turn it in. So hopefully you guys did the pre-assessment, and then at the end of this, please continue to do the post-assessment, and we'll kind of go through this the best we can. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to us. So Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Rachel. As Morgan said, we are graduate assistants for Power Gamma and Health Promotion. So Power Gamma stands for Promoting Ohio University Wellness, Education, and Responsibility. And we are a peer health organization on campus. And what we do is identify different critical health issues that college students might be facing. So this could be alcohol and other drugs, bystander intervention, safe sex, healthy relationships, and we program to various different campus or areas on campus. So today you will be going through the Choices program. This is not a program that is going to encourage you not to drink or kind of try to tell you what to do. Rather, it's going to kind of give you some tools and education to make responsible decisions regarding alcohol. Also, we are going to talk about the use of alcohol and other drugs and mixing it with alcohol. And we will also be talking about bystander intervention and some potentially risky scenarios that we hope you don't find yourself in, but kind of give you some tools if you or someone you know does find themselves in this situation.
Yeah. So just to reiterate kind of what Rachel said, like we do not say that anyone like watching this video or who goes through this program engages in any of these things, alcohol related or any of the bystander things we go through. It's just to give you facts and information that you can share with your friends, your peers, your family, whoever it may be, and whatever stories or situations or facts that we give you guys today, you can share with whoever. So please spread the word and just take what you can from this program. Also want to say that there might be some things that you have seen in alcohol EDU, but this is not alcohol EDU. Unfortunately, it's usually a interaction, like a conversation, but just reflect and know that we try to make it as interactive as we can. So going on, Rachel, if you want to start to scroll down anything at the beginning of this, Rachel. Okay, so just
we're good to go.
Okay, cool. So at the beginning of this, it's your choice. So again, just all the things you choose to do in college or on the weekends is your choice. So we want to help you reflect on your choices, whether you use alcohol or not, reduce the risk of being harmed by your own or someone else's drinking, provide skills to be an active bystander, and just understand that aspect of the Bobcat family. So you guys have this book provided to you, so you guys can read through it or go back to it, but we're going to start with the first activity. So kind of reflecting, do you guys choose to drink alcoholic beverages? Why or why not? And then what role does alcohol play in your social life? So you can write these things down. If you have an activity where these things, you have to write them down for an assignment, please do so. But Rachel and I are kind of talk about what people would usually say in a program like this.
Yeah, so I think typically, one reason that people would choose to drink would be celebrating in some way. So whether it's your birthday, a friend's birthday, like a graduation party, so anything that's kind of celebratory. I think this could look a little bit different since a lot of you are not on campus right now. So it's interesting to see when we've been facilitating so far, some of the responses. We've got a lot of, football games type thing or at dinner with family. So this might look different once you come to campus. But what are some other things you can think of, Morgan, that people have said of why they choose to drink alcohol?
I think a big thing is peer pressure. Some people, I think it's more of the other end, but some people do like the taste.
Mm-hmm.
It can be more of like a cultural thing. I've heard that as well, of people like drinking in other countries. I've had students from other countries
Oh yeah,
say that it's legal there, so it's more of like a casual drink.
especially at a younger age. Like a lot of countries, it's legal when you're 18. Yeah, I didn't even ever think of that.
Yeah, so it's all a wide range. But then when it comes to why not to drink, people kind of have a harder time thinking of this. Um, I think a big part is the legal aspect again.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a citizen of the United States, you have to be 21 to drink. So not getting in that legal trouble, whether it's legally or maybe with your parents or someone else.
Yep.
What
I
else?
also think I think alcoholism, so a family history of just addiction in general, whether it's alcohol or other drugs, a lot of the time that will deter people, and just general health conditions. So maybe you have a medical condition or you take a certain medication that kind of, it makes you feel sick when you take it, or it's potentially dangerous. Those are a lot of the things that I've heard in the past for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's just one way or another, doesn't matter. So it can play a role in your social life. I think a lot of people drink to feel like a little more comfortable, especially if they don't know people in a social settings, kind of getting that loosey-goosey feeling. So we have a wide range. You'd be surprised on campus, the wide range of people who do and do not drink.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I think too with the social life, I think in college there's obviously, especially right now, there's a lot of stress. So it's kind of a way to let loose. It's like your reprieve from the tough weeks that you look forward to on the weekends. But I think what Morgan said is really important, that we don't often think about the people that don't drink. We kind of just assume that everybody does, but there are a lot of people that choose not to, and that is perfectly okay. Alrighty, moving on. So our next activity, which you should probably also have some sort of written component for, is what we would call the healthy majority. So as I just stated, we kind of don't talk about the population of students who drink low risk. So we kind of have a way of classifying these students. I'll preface this with these statistics are typically taken from your alcohol EDU, but because of the nature of this year, these statistics are actually from the class before you, and they were taken before they came to college. So the point of using these statistics is to say, okay, this population of students was making healthy choices before they came to college, and this program can kind of help you continue to reinforce those healthy decisions. So I'm just going to quickly kind of go through the statistics, and then Morgan and I are going to chat about it a little bit. So 25% of students said that they were abstainers, which means that they had not drank before they came to college. 26% said that they were non-drinkers, so they have drank, but not in the last 2 weeks. And then 27% said that they were moderate drinkers, which means they drink less than 5 in a sitting when drinking. And this all comprises the healthy campus majority, which is 78%. So typically we ask, are you in the healthy majority? So Morgan, are you in the healthy majority?
Yes, I would say I am a low risk drinker. I also would say that this has not always been the case. I've been a non-drinker,
Mm-hmm.
but I have also been a high-risk drinker on like big weekends here at OU. So I think it
Yeah.
just definitely changes with how I've grown to become self-aware and also with the environment that I've been in.
Yeah, I agree. I think, my first couple of years of college, I was probably in that more moderate to high risk because of things like binge drinking. Like I wasn't like drinking every night, but when I was drinking, it was in excess, which I think still happens. I mean, there are plenty of people, even adults, that have issues like that because of things like football games. Like that's a big thing, sporting events, or, we have a bunch of different events on campus here that kind of might motivate that a little bit. So with what is your reaction? I think that we just kind of like to point out that this number actually fluctuates a lot. I think Morgan and I talked about when we first started doing this, it was as high as like 85, maybe
I
86.
think it's like 80, it might have been 85. It was like 80
Yeah.
something.
Right. So it definitely has fluctuated over the years. Of course, we acknowledge like survey bias. Some people might have not answered accurately on it. Maybe they lied and said that they drank more than they did. Maybe they lied and said they drank less. Just because people do that, they might fear would get in trouble. Or so we definitely acknowledge that. But again, the point of this number is to kind of reinforce that most of you were making healthy decisions before you came to college, and we hope that we can help you kind of continue to make those choices. So going on those next two questions, why is it that people think college students drink so much? I actually kind of combine these questions, and I usually ask students why they think Ohio University students drink so much. So the biggest reason for this is because we have this reputation as a party school. But Morgan, what are some other things that you think contribute kind of to that party school reputation, or contribute to why people think we all drink so much?
Well, I think especially in today's age, media has a big factor in everything. I also always use this scenario, but if you are in a group of people and everyone's wearing a blue shirt and one person's wearing a red shirt, you're going to remember the person wearing the red shirt. So if there's a big group of people at OU and we do have events that go on, but that one person in the red shirt, or say the red shirt is the person who is drunk or acting crazy or doing something stupid, you're going to remember that person even though the majority of people are drinking in a healthy way or they might be sober. So I think that gives OU a big rep, even if that person isn't really a student, or you see the things in the media that were the big things that make the news, you think you associate that with OU because it was here. But that doesn't mean everyone's like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we also have a lot of like events that perpetuate that too. Whether it's homecoming, Halloween, fest season, all of these like big weekends that to most people kind of revolve around drinking. But also know that you can attend those events and have fun and it not have to be associated with drinking. This year we probably won't have much of that at all, but in previous years, you know, there are ways to engage in all of the different activities and things on campus that don't involve drinking at all. Also, moving on to obviously this is not the image that we want for Ohio University students. I think personally, I think it's gotten better in the last couple of years. And I think that's because people push back on it. So maybe when you first told someone that you were going to OU, they were like, oh, stay out of trouble, be careful. And they might have not said that if you said you were going somewhere else. So I always say, you know, push back on that stereotype. Tell them I'm going there because they have a good program. You know, I'm going there for my education, because you don't want to sit down on an interview and that be the first thing that someone thinks about you. And like I said, I definitely think it's getting better because we are kind of pushing back on that stereotype for sure.
Yeah. I also want to state, like, if you do engage in these kind of behaviors, that keep in mind when you're out in public, you're representing OU, which everyone's like, okay, whatever. But when you present yourself, you're representing your family, you're representing your friends, you're representing whatever clubs or sports you're in, you're representing your major. So your name has a big factor in a lot of organizations, a lot of groups in the community. So just keep that in mind when you're making maybe risky decisions.
I mean, I also think that too applies right now. I mean, you are held responsible for things that you do even when you're not on campus. So you might think that, oh, well, since I'm home, I can do X, Y, Z, and if I get in trouble, it's not a big deal. There actually can be repercussions for people that get into trouble off campus. So I agree. You're always being held responsible, and you're always kind of holding that Bobcat image. So I think that's super important for sure. Alrighty. Moving on. Morgan, if you want to discuss the scenario.
Yeah, so you guys might also have an assignment or a little reflection based off this scenario. So I will read it and then we'll go through the questions together. So it's a Thursday night. You have been studying for a big test all afternoon. Your friends stop by and want you to go with them to an off-campus party. After some persuading, you decide to go but are determined only to have 2 drinks. You need to have a clear head for your test tomorrow. It has been a few hours since you have had anything to eat. Upon walking into the party, you are handed a red cup with a mixed drink. You finish this one and get another. Though you intend to to drink this drink more slowly, it tastes good, so it goes down quickly. Your friend brings you another one. So this clearly doesn't happen as much now, but I think at any college it happens quite often. I know I've had different phases in my life where maybe I would have gone out, but for the majority, I don't think I would go. But kind of reflecting on yourself, what would you do in this situation? How would you feel if you were in this position? So Rachel, how would you answer this?
I would say I usually was the person that wouldn't go out, but there were some times I did, and I usually regretted it because I did have kind of like this person. I did have trouble telling myself, okay, I'm only going to have 2 drinks, or I'm only going to have this many drinks. That is something that once you start drinking, it gets really hard to talk yourself through that. So yeah, I would say I tried to keep myself out of this, but it definitely has happened. And I've definitely had friends that it has happened to before too.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will say like they just want to go out. A lot of people are in that boat. But then there are some people who said if they would go out, it would have to be like they wouldn't even worry about the test. It would have to be a class that they wouldn't worry about the test. I know personally, I do not have the, what is the word?
Discipline.
Discipline. Yes, thank you. I don't have the self-discipline to be like, okay, I will only have 2 drinks. I kind
Right.
of go out and I'm like, whatever kind of happens, happens.
Yeah.
I do keep track of how much I'm drinking, but I would constantly be thinking in the back of my head the whole night about that test and about those only 2 drinks that I don't think I would even have fun. So if I'm going to go have
Yeah.
fun, I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah. I agree for sure.
So, how many drinks have you had, Rachel?
Well, you actually don't know how many drinks you've had. You've had 2 containers, but you really don't know what was in the container. So it could have been beer, it could have been liquor, it could have been jungle juice, it could have had who knows what in it. So you're really not sure how much alcohol you've actually consumed, even though you've only had 2 containers of alcohol.
Yes, perfect. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then why is it that you're getting intoxicated so quickly and what factors could be contributing?
So for this person, they one thing that I think a lot of people don't think of is that they are stressed. So kind of like talking about, I'd kind of go into it if I really did do this with like a kind of screw it mindset. So I was like, oh, I've been studying all day. I need to let loose. I need to, and that is going to make you want to drink more because you're going to kind of want to dull that stress a little bit. So I think that's definitely something. The obvious thing is that you haven't eaten anything. You also don't know what you were drinking, so you don't know what type of alcohol you were drinking. Let's see, what else?
Starting to get drunk, so you're not really
Great.
less cognitively aware.
Your judgment's starting to be impaired. You're drinking quickly, so that's going to get you drunker faster, which we'll also talk about a little bit later as well. Oh, peer pressure, of course. That kind of goes with the next one of two of why you're having trouble sticking to your goal. Definitely peer pressure. Also wanting to let loose and just starting to get drunk. I mean, once you start to get drunk, it's harder to get yourself to stop, for sure.
I think the last 2 questions kind of, the answers kind of answer both the questions, so we can kind of just skip through that one.
Yep.
But if you guys have any questions about that, again, reach out. But that is kind of how we go through that scenario.
Alrighty.
And standard drinks.
Yep. So next we have standard drinks. And so like we were just talking about in that scenario, we kept saying that person didn't know how much they were drinking because they didn't know what was in the cup. So the red Solo cup can kind of be a little bit of a measure for this. So the lines on the Solo cup actually do mean something. They are measurements. So I'm going to go through each different type of alcohol and explain to you all the measurements and what they mean. So 1 ounce of 100 proof hard liquor is 1 shot. So if you were to take a shot glass of 100 proof or 50% alcohol liquor and put it in a red Solo cup, and it's like this much. It's a very, very small amount. It would go to that very first line on the Solo cup. And then 1.5 ounce of 80 proof hard liquor, which is 40% alcohol. This is typically like Smirnoff, more what people would drink would be more 40% alcohol as far as liquor goes. And that's 1.5 ounces. And it goes again right here. Next, you have wine. So a standard drink of wine is 4 ounces. I believe that in I think I actually just learned this, in a bottle of wine, there is 5 standard drinks of wine. I think that's something around that number. So that kind of gives you an idea. Remember that wine has various alcohol content depending on the type of wine, but typically it's around 14%. And then you have this middle one that doesn't really have a line, but it's pretty much right in the middle. You have malt liquor and ice beer. So malt liquor would be like, what's the one I can't think of? Colt 45 is malt liquor, like King Cobra, that's malt liquor. And then ice beer is not super popular, but those are all 8 ounces. Then you have micro beers. So this would be a lot of like craft type beers. So right here we have Jackie O's beer. For those of you who may not know, Jackie O's is a brewery on campus that brews like specialty and craft beers here in Athens. It's sold all over the state, so I'm sure you've seen it before. But they have beers as high as like 14% alcohol. So that's just something to keep in mind. Usually you would drink those out of a can anyway, so that would be a standard drink too. But also IPAs, and then wine coolers, which would be like Smirnoff Ice and Mike's Hard. These are all 10 ounces. And then you have beers, so your typical Budweiser, Bud Light, PBR, Natural Light, all that is 12 ounces. So keep in mind that 12 ounces of beer, a standard drink of beer, is not filled all the way to the top of the solo cup. So if you were drinking out of, say, a keg and you were filling it to the top every time, that would actually be more than one drink, as if you were like drinking a can, like if you were drinking cans of beer the whole day. So this is not to say that you should take your solo cup out with you and measure everything out before you drink it, but it does kind of give you put into perspective how much you're actually drinking, and kind of can help you pace yourself and maybe keep yourself from over drinking in times when it's difficult to know exactly how much alcohol you've consumed. Alrighty. Moving on to the effects of BAC. So BAC stands for blood alcohol content. So this is kind of a table that very generally will give you kind of some perspective on how each person would feel with this BAC. Now, again, we're going to talk about this later, but this is going to vary a lot person to person. There are different things that contribute to how drunk someone feels and how quickly they get drunk, but this is a general guide. So, I would take a look at this and kind of think about where you are on a typical night when you drink. So I would say for me, probably between mostly drunk, probably for me, would be where I am. What do you think, Morgan, for yourself?
I think it definitely depends, but usually in between legally and impaired and drunk.
Yeah, of course. And I was just thinking too, it depends on like last week was my birthday, so I would drink a little bit more. So it depends on kind of what the scenario might be as to why I'm choosing to drink. But something to keep in mind is when you start getting into these numbers down here, this is when you're going to be at risk for alcohol poisoning and potentially worse. So this is something that you most definitely want to stay away from. And we're going to put this into perspective here in a minute as well. So this is just a quick little sciencey lesson about the effects of BAC. I'm not going to read it word for word, but most of it here. So alcohol is a depressant. So it's a central nervous system depressant. And this means that it controls all of your voluntary and involuntary functions. So this is like walking, talking, breathing, heart rate. We were talking about your judgment being impaired, all of that. Also, alcohol goes everywhere blood goes in your bloodstream, and this includes your brain. So this is why when you drink, your brain actually swells, and this can be as well as dehydration. This can be why you get a really bad headache after you drink, because your brain is actually swollen, which is kind of crazy to think about. Alcohol slows down your brain's ability to function, things like reaction times, fine motor skills, and your thinking processes become affected as your blood alcohol concentration increases. BAC is the ratio of blood to body. It is usually expressed as a percentage. So it's 0.10% means 1 part of alcohol for every 1,000 parts of blood. So just a little sciencey fact there. As a person's BAC goes up, your voluntary functions slow down. This is when you would start slurring your speech, might get clumsy. You might say things that you wouldn't normally say. Some people might get a little bit more have more courage to say things that they wouldn't normally say or do things they wouldn't normally do. Also, as your BAC increases, it can slow down your breathing, your blood pressure can drop, your pulse can slow down, and these are typically signs of alcohol poisoning or an alcohol overdose. When your BAC is 0.06 or higher, this is when your judgment and decision making starts being affected. And again, you might say something you normally wouldn't say or do something you normally wouldn't do. Once your BAC is above 0.06, you will have a hard time sticking to your limits. I also always add here, remember that if you are 21 or older, the legal limit for driving is 0.08. And if you are under the age of 21, the legal limit for driving is 0.02. So something to keep in mind that will actually be kind of helpful for this next activity that we're going to do here. Alrighty.
All right, so how much do you drink? Again, we know that not everyone drinks, so if you don't drink, that's okay. But if you choose to drink, what is your drink of choice? So Rachel, do you have a drink of choice?
Yeah, it's funny because my drink of choice has definitely changed as I've gone throughout college. Now my drink of choice is definitely wine, but when I was in undergrad, it was definitely like White Claw towards the end when White Claw got really popular. And then it kind of started as like vodka soda. Like that's typically what I would drink, like a vodka Sprite or something.
Yeah, I think mine, like going into college, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't even think about it right now. But like the very sugary drinks, like the Mike's Harder and things like that. But if I like go out, I think it's more of like a vodka water Mio, but I definitely am more of like a casual drinker now. So like it's like a seltzer or wine for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely has changed.
Me too, for sure.
But I like to get fancy sometimes. We'll see. You know,
for sure.
Does this particular drink, so let's just base it off of like your wine and White Claw, beer, and a cocktail. So we'll do like those 4. So does it contain the same amount of alcohol each time?
Wine, definitely not, because you're pouring, I mean, even if you're pouring it yourself, I mean, I don't like measure out how much wine I'm drinking. I just usually just pour it in. So the alcohol content is the same each time, like the percentage is the same each time, but how much you're actually drinking probably isn't. And that actually goes for restaurants too, like when typically they try to pour to the same spot on wine, but it's interesting because different restaurants, even different bars kind of do different pours. So for wine, definitely not.
Yeah, I think they do have like these new like wine in a can, and they're usually the can is like a standard beer can, but it has 2 glasses of wine in it.
Yeah,
which is
I've seen that before.
But that would be standard. But then when it comes to cans like beer and White Claw, it would contain the same amount. But all of those cocktails are definitely not. The way people pour, the way individuals pour, and all different kinds, like certain vodkas don't have the same proof, which we'll talk about a little later as well. So we definitely don't know that. And beer, craft beer, like from restaurants, we don't know that either.
Right.
So how many drinks do you typically consume when you drink? This is kind of more of a self-reflection on your guys's worksheet or assignment, whatever.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, again, this is always going to vary for me. I think depends on who you're talking to. Some people that can drink a lot of beer will say like they can drink 20 beers, and then there's some people who are like, I drink 5 and I start to feel drunk. And you know, we know, we all can kind of understand that everyone is affected differently. We're going to talk about that in a minute too, of why that is. But I don't think that, you know, I think it's fine that that number varies a lot for everybody. As far as the next questions, like how many days do you typically drink? I think people usually say the weekends. You know, when we're on campus, maybe it's a little bit different for some people. But I would say typically people say the weekends. Maybe they go out for Thursday night, or they go to karaoke on Wednesday night when that was a thing. So stuff like that.
I know for me, I've talked to people and it's the same for them. Like I haven't drank as much as I used to. So like for me, drinking like 2, maybe 3 White Claws, I'm good for the night. But like I used to not be like that.
No, me
But
neither.
I think people also have to be aware as how often you drink because tolerance does increase or decrease.
Yeah, for sure.
I think this little green part is good just to mention really quick for you guys. So count your drinks by serving size, not the number of containers, set your limits. Don't accept a drink if you don't know what's in it or who gave it to you, or just don't accept a drink from somebody you don't know, or even people you do know. Just make sure you know what's in it. And don't leave your drink unattended. Even if you go to the bathroom, you know, it might be a little gross, but take it with you. Or if you don't like taking it with you, get a new one. Just don't leave it unattended.
Yeah, it's never worth it. It's always worth it to get a new one. So, alrighty. It's all you, Morgan.
All right. So just going off a little bit of what we just talked about, absorption of alcohol definitely changes from person to person. So there are several factors that affect the absorption of alcohol. First off, the amount of alcohol consumed and the potency, I never say that right, it never comes out the first time, of the drink or the proof. So like I said earlier, the proof, it kind of goes back to that standard drink that Rachel was talking about. So proof for vodka could be like 80% proof, or some vodkas are like 50 or 100. So we just have to pay attention. It's all listed on all the cans and all the bottles. I think most beers are like 5%. So the higher the percentages, the higher your BAC will be, the higher the proof. The rate of drinking, so kind of going back to that scenario, the quicker you drink, the quicker it goes into your bloodstream. So it definitely has an effect. So stay hydrated. The effervescence of the drink, so the more bubbly a drink, the more quickly it gets absorbed. So all those bubbly drinks, the seltzers, the drinks with sodas in it will definitely increase the absorption faster than those that don't. So if you have like a vodka water versus a vodka soda, the absorption is much faster. Your weight and body mass. So definitely has an effect. Muscle versus fat also has an effect that builds off the body mass. So this is a very strange scenario, but I think it helps people understand. If you have a John Cena and you have a Pillsbury Doughboy who the exact same height, the exact same weight, John Cena has more muscle mass, body mass, like that aspect, and Pillsbury Doughboy is Joey. Pillsbury Doughboy will get drunk faster based off the absorption of alcohol. And then the amount of food in the stomach. So you might hear people say eat lots of bread. It's actually important to eat carbs and protein. So like a peanut butter sandwich or chicken and rice is really good before you go drink. It's definitely important to have that beforehand and not after. It's good to also have it after, which will help the hangover, but it's important to have it beforehand to slow down the absorption. Anything I'm missing there, Rachel? Okay, cool. So going off of that, kind of into the alcohol and biology, kind of emphasizing the fact that everyone's a little different. On average, women have a higher fat content in their bodies than men. So going back to the weight and body mass aspect, This means that there is less fluid volume. In other words, there is less blood running through the bloodstream, resulting in an overall higher alcohol concentration. We all have liver enzymes that result in the oxidation of alcohol. So that being said, women only have a trace amount of this enzyme, which means that men begin to burn alcohol sooner and faster. Overall, women, and when we were talking about this, going back to that little green box, when referring to a woman in these scenarios, we're including all assigned female at birth, and then when referring to men, this includes all assigned male at birth. So biology in that aspect. And then going to number 3, so woman's BAC depends on her menstrual cycle. So if she's on her period, it will take her longer to burn off the alcohol since the rate of oxidation will change. So it happens like right before her period. I know a lot of my friends, it happens during their period as well because they're losing a lot of blood, they're losing the oxygen, so before and during. And then if a woman is taking a hormonal contraceptive, the pill, the patch, IUD, not only will it make her feel more intoxicated when she does drink, she will stay intoxicated longer. So a good point for this is it's especially important to realize this if someone begins drinking and then they start taking birth control, because it will change when they start drinking and they might not be aware of that. As for someone who has been taking birth control and then starts drinking, it might not change as much unless they change their birth control. So it's just good to be aware of these things and know that everyone's a little different. So even if you're in a group of people and everyone has the exact same amount of alcohol in the exact same time, everyone's going to absorb it a little differently. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, looks good to me.
Okay, cool.
All right, moving right along. So we are going to talk about sobering up. And so what are some things that you've heard that people can sober up quickly, Morgan?
Oh, sorry, my mic was being weird. Puking and rallying.
Yeah, that's definitely one. I would say people say drinking water, drinking coffee, exercising. I had someone last week say getting in trouble, and I was like, okay, like it sobers you up when you like have to talk seriously. And I was like,
Oh,
I mean, okay. I hope that doesn't happen, but I guess I could see that. Yeah, really. Exercising.
Bread. I heard say like eat bread.
Oh, eating in general, yeah. So unfortunately, so I guess I always say it's important to say that some of these things will make you feel better. For example, if you're super, super nauseous and you throw up, yeah, you're probably going to feel better. But your BAC doesn't like magically go down because you threw up. You're not any less drunk. You just feel less nauseous. And same with like drinking water. Drinking water is going to help you feel more hydrated, but it's not going to like magically take the alcohol out of your bloodstream. That would be nice. I always caution against drinking coffee because coffee is a stimulant and alcohol is a depressant. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but it can actually make your BAC rise quicker. It also dehydrates you really, really bad. So you are going to feel, once you have that, hour of however long coffee hits you, after that, you're going to feel even worse, and potentially your BAC could spike even more. Let's see. The only thing that really is going to help is time. So sleep would probably be an acceptable answer too. I always say that. So alcohol is burned off at 0.015% per hour. So if someone has a BAC of 0.16% at midnight, it will take until 10 a.m. the next day for their BAC to be back at 0. So that's like 10 hours. And we're going to put this into perspective a little bit more in just a second, actually. So Morgan, if you want to talk about the chart.
Yeah, so if you guys look at this chart, it's based off of someone having class the next day. So at 2 a.m. you go out, typically, not during a pandemic, bars close at 2 a.m. But this is saying someone is in bed, dizzy, disoriented, 2 a.m., 0.20. And if you remember the chart that we had, that was like very drunk, I believe. Right, Rachel?
Yeah, it's pretty drunk. I would say like maybe you blacked out, you might have thrown up. You're not like in alcohol poisoning range, but like you're getting there.
Yeah, you're pretty drunk. So you go through the night, wake up in the morning, and then not fully recovered until 4 p.m. And we have a little activity that says, like, what are your implications? And for the most part, people are like, oh, it's fine. Like, you might feel a little poopy. You might not want to go to class. You might feel awful the next day, but it's fine. But if you think about this in aspects of, I know, especially freshman year, I had a lot of friends that went to different colleges. Or even now, if I go somewhere and then I have to do something the next day, say it's a Saturday night at 2 p.m., you stop drinking, you're in bed, you're really drunk. For me, since I am over the age of 21, if I'm driving and I get pulled over and an officer smells alcohol on me and breathalyzes me, I will not, I will have a DUI up until 10 a.m. So I have to wait after 10 a.m., according to this chart, that I will not get a DUI. As for people under the age of 21, they would get a DUI up until 2 p.m. And this is if you are in bed at 2 a.m. So that kind of changes things. It makes people look at the chart and like drinking a little bit differently, because a lot of people think that sleep is what's going to change your BAC. But if you go to sleep and you wake up a couple hours later, you're still drunk. Or you might not be drunk, but your BAC is still high. You still have alcohol in your system. So it's important to keep that in mind.
I think too, like what you just said too, like a lot of people will wake up and they'll be like, oh, I'm not hungover, I feel fine. Well, that's because you're still drunk. So you might not feel like all of the effects that you felt the night before when you were super drunk, but your BAC is still high. So if this person had a 9 a.m. and they went to class, they were, 0.09 is you're pretty drunk in class. You'd also start getting hungover like throughout your day, which would be really unfortunate. You wouldn't be thinking as clearly. You could risk getting in trouble. You could risk, I don't know, falling, something like that. So I agree. I think that this really puts into perspective kind of making future decisions of drinking and how slow your BAC really does go down with all of those, even bearing all those different factors we just talked about in mind too.
Yeah.
Maybe. So this next little part is kind of talking about drugs and mixing drugs and alcohol. So the first thing we talk about is using prescription or over-the-counter medications. So this could be like daily medications that you're prescribed, or maybe you are sick in some way and you're starting to take something for that. And there are a lot of medications that can interact with alcohol. They typically say on the label. However, I say always ask. The pharmacist, they're never going to judge you for asking. A really good example of this is there's a bunch of different antibiotics, obviously, but a typical antibiotic that they give for a UTI can actually make you really, really sick, like you vomit and stuff if you drink alcohol with it. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're newly taking any sort of medication. Always ask your doctor or your pharmacist about that. And then kind of going off of that, so depressant medications, this would be any type of depression medication, anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, and also any like illicit drugs that you're taking. So Xanax is a legal drug, but if you were taking it illegally, this would be a depressant medication. So this is going to intensify the effects of alcohol a ton, because alcohol is also a depressant. So someone who has taken Xanax and drink alcohol is going to feel incredibly intoxicated. They are going to be very, very out of it, not be able to make concrete decisions. They might have trouble speaking. And if they take too much of either, they will become, their heart rate can slow, their blood pressure can drop. This is what can lead to alcohol poisoning and other situations that we definitely want to avoid, like coma and death. So just something to keep in mind when mixing depressant medications. This can also go with a medication that you take on the regular. Maybe you take an anti-anxiety medication or a depression medication. For some people, that might be different. That's always going to be something you're going to want to consult with your doctor about when you start taking a new medicine. Going off of that, stimulants. So the most popular stimulants that we think of are, well, for one, caffeine, and then we think of like ADHD medications. So Adderall, Vyvanse, Concerta, Ritalin, those are kind of the main types. A lot of people use stimulants on college campuses. It's gained popularity in the last 5-10 years. One reason is because it dulls the symptoms of being intoxicated. So when you do something like take an Adderall before drinking, for example, you're not going to feel as drunk. So you can drink for longer and you can drink more without feeling drunk. However, as we have learned previously, this does not mean that your BAC is lower. So it can really, really lead to over drinking because you're drinking way more than you typically would drink and for a lot longer than you typically would drink. Can very easily lead to alcohol poisoning. This is also the same with an illegal drug, like something like cocaine, that can also cause the same type of experience. Also, with illegal drugs, like if you're taking Xanax illegally or any type of opioid or Percocet, even ADHD medication like Adderall, all of those things are, you have the potential for them to be like cut with something. So the popular thing right now is fentanyl. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality, and it is on our campus. It's on campuses everywhere. So that's something you really need to keep in mind if you were to make that decision. And, you know, we recognize that the things that are out there just aren't really what they are anymore. So that's something that, you know, you really have to be incredibly careful about. And we definitely want to keep that off of our campus. Just a quick little tidbit about marijuana. Marijuana has no psychoactive effects with alcohol. It might make you feel paranoid or nervous. It might make you feel nauseous in some way. However, it's not going to cause like a rapid decrease in blood pressure or heart rate or anything like that. And then the other thing that we talk about with marijuana, just so you all know, that although marijuana is medicinally legal in Ohio, it is not federally legal. So even if you have your medical card and you live in a residence hall, you cannot have it in your dorm. So a lot of people think, oh, well, since I have my card, I can have it with me and it'll be fine and I won't get in trouble. Unfortunately, since it is not federally legal, that is not the case. So you cannot have it or use it on campus in any form at all. So I know that was a lot, but that's just something that, you know, you really need to keep in mind. Maybe you haven't had any exposure to any of these drugs, but like we said, the reality of it is it's on our campus. So something really to bear in mind when maybe, unfortunately, you're introduced to something like this. Alrighty. Moving on. Okay, so moving into bystander intervention, we're kind of going to shift gears a little bit here. So bystander intervention is kind of what we call a term that we use to talk about the ability to kind of intervene or respond in a situation when you feel that someone is at risk or in harm's way in some way. It's important to understand that sexual assault and sexual violence, or just violence in general, is not the only time that bystander intervention is necessary. And we're going to talk about some different scenarios. I think that a lot of people think that that's the only thing that you would need to use bystander intervention for, which is definitely not the case. Morgan, do you want to do the 4Ds so that they can get a break from hearing me talk?
Sure.
Go through them.
Sure. I can do that. So going off the 4Ds, we just added recently, the past couple years, delay, but direct, delegate, and distract. You might have heard these in other situations, other programs, but direct is clearly, as it states, get directly involved if you feel comfortable in doing so. So we'll have scenarios where you can do this, but say you see something out and about, you directly address the person and say whatever you need to say. It could be in a alcohol-related situation. It could be from a microaggression. It could just be you heard a rude comment. It could be anything like that. Just directly addressing the person who you believe is doing a wrongdoing and not necessarily making it right, but just addressing it, stating that it's wrong. Delegate is find someone else who may have the ability to help. So this could be a friend, this could be a professor, this could be a friend of the person who is doing the wrongdoing, you believe, or knows more about the situation. It also could be even the police. It could be your RA if you're in a dorm. It could be anything like that. Distract. This is when you use your imagination to disrupt the situation. So, for example, if you see someone getting in an argument, maybe you accidentally fall or you spill your drink, or you say, excuse me, do you have directions, even though you know where you're going? Kind of disrupting the situation that is happening that might be inappropriate, or you might be unsure of what the situation is, and just kind of sizzling it out. And then delaying, you would only use delay if you knew the person involved. So if you knew the person who was being assaulted, or you knew the person who had the bad thing happen, you wouldn't. I suggest you not going up to a stranger and then later finding out who they were and delaying to them and being like, hey, remember me? I was the one who disrupted the situation. I would kind of just let that go. You did all you could. But if you knew the person, if it was in class, checking up with a person in class, or if it was your friend, checking up on them after the fact and seeing if they're okay or if they need any resources. So we do have some scenarios, Rachel, if you want to pull those up. And we can kind of go through them to give you guys a better picture of what we mean by the 4Ds.
Should I share them, or should I just read them?
Whichever you prefer. You can just read them.
I'm just gonna read them so that I don't have to switch my screen over.
That's fine.
Okay. So what we're going to do, what we would typically do in this situation is kind of ask how you all would respond, and we want you to do that on your little activity sheet. But what we're going to do is read it, and then we're going to kind of give you an example of how you would use each D in each scenario. So I can go ahead and read the first one. Today in class, students are introducing themselves as a part of first day activities. Each student shares their name, major, and hometown. One student, who appears to be of Asian descent, states that her hometown is Cleveland, Ohio. Another student quickly raises his hand and asks, but where are you actually from? The student again states that she's from Cleveland, but your classmate continues to press about her hometown, clearly not believing her. The student who shares is clearly uncomfortable. So first off, Morgan, why is this comment problematic?
So this addresses the microaggression that we were talking about earlier. A microaggression kind of, it can be racist, it can be sexist, anything like that, where it's not directly like, it's not a direct statement addressing those issues, but it's hinting at it. And that's why it's micro. It's a small aggression towards someone else about any of those issues. It's not something that everyone always picks up on, but you can tell like, oh, that was wrong.
Yeah, and it's typically minority groups. So people who are, Black people, people who are of Asian descent, pretty much any ethnicity or race other than white. Maybe this could be for a religious reason. Also the LGBTQ community, all of that. So people that typically are in the minority experience microaggressions, honestly, every day. One of them from a video that that Morgan and I have watched talks about, this is just an example that I think has come up a lot. A Black woman gives a presentation and people come up to her afterwards and say, wow, you speak so well. Well, first of all, you probably wouldn't say that to a white person. And although that might at first not seem like, oh, that's a compliment, but it really isn't, because a lot of people assume that Black people don't communicate as well, or that, they're harder to understand, and they use like slang. So saying you speak so well is very insulting. And like Morgan said, it can be hard to pick up on, especially when you're the person doing it. And that's why, and we all have our own implicit biases 100%. So it does happen. And I think that in today's world, it's very important to intervene in this situation. So going off of that, Morgan, how would we be direct in this situation?
So I'm a very direct person. So
Yeah.
I would definitely do this. This situation makes me mad. So directly, I would address the person who stated that and say, I would try to stay calm and not start an argument, but just say that was rude. She said where she's from, drop it, and just understand that she said where she's from.
Right. Yeah, I think if you feel comfortable, I think there are people, especially today, that feel comfortable like directly calling attention to like using it almost as like your little teachable moment. Like, hey, do you know what you just did? Like that's actually microaggression and it's very problematic and quite frankly, it's racist. So I would do something like that in that situation too. However, not everybody feels comfortable doing that, and that is totally fine. So you could delegate. In this situation, it would be a really good, your professor would be a really good person to delegate to. And maybe that's not like right in the moment, like call your professor over and be like, hey, look, listen to just what happened. Maybe you just kind of use distract in this and kind of move on and then go to your professor at the end of class and say, hey, this person made a really like disruptive, hateful comment towards this person. And I just want you to be aware of it because I don't think that it was appropriate at all. So that could be how you would use delegate really and distract in that situation too. And then delay. So maybe you would just, again, maybe you don't feel comfortable having that direct conversation like with the group because you don't want to make that person that the comment was said to you uncomfortable. But maybe you go up to that person after class and be like, hey, I just want to talk really quick about what you said because it's very problematic and here's why. And calmly have that discussion. And then also following up with the person that the comment was said to and being like, hey, are you okay? Maybe next time we could work somewhere else. We don't need to work with this group, or maybe you can tell the professor that in the future you don't want to work with this person. So yeah. Any other suggestions, Morgan?
I would say also sometimes even delegating to the professor can be hard for people.
Yeah,
So
true.
if you have a friend or a peer in the class who would be comfortable talking to the professor or talking to the person, that's another way to delegate
Yeah,
because it can be intimidating, especially as a freshman not knowing a lot of people. And some classes you will have upperclassmen in your class. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a good call. Most definitely. Alrighty, so we're gonna quickly go through our next scenario and kind of do the same thing. Here we go. You are at a house party. It's getting late and you've had a few drinks. You notice somebody from your math class talking to somebody else at the party. Both are visibly intoxicated and slurring their words. They begin making out. After a few moments, the two start to go upstairs, visibly stumbling. Okay, so first of all, how does this situation make you feel?
I think for me, this situation is worrisome, but I have been in college for 5 years now. I think coming in, a lot of people would not think twice about it. And when people
Yeah.
think of the situation, they often think of a male and a female.
Mm-hmm.
But this could be any partners. It could be two males, two females, it could be anything.
Yeah.
So it's important to think about um, all the things we are talking about and how it could be worrisome. So now I think I'm worried when I see things like this, but I don't think I would have been as an underclassman. Do you think, Rachel?
Yeah. It kind of depends on people's experience. I remember my first time sitting through choices. I was like, this definitely it could be scary, but that's important to understand too. That like we're not saying that every situation like this ends in a risky situation. It's not always the case. But that's why bystander intervention is important because you can understand that okay, this is fine. Both of these people are consenting to this, and it is totally fine. Who knows? They could just be going upstairs. They could live there, and they're just going to go upstairs and watch a movie. But we don't know that, and they might not know that. They might not know what's going on for various reasons. So that's why I think that the 4Ds in this case are really important. I have been in this scenario more than once, and I am always direct. I have no problem just walking up to whoever, again, female, male, it doesn't matter, and just being like, hey, are you okay? This is a situation where body language and nonverbal cues can be really important. So someone who is afraid in some way might not say, yes, I am afraid. Please help me get out of this situation. but they might, use their eyes or some sort of verbal cue to kind of signal to you that they need help. And if they're unable to answer, that probably means that they are too drunk or otherwise intoxicated to be doing what they are doing. I think that would be one way that I would definitely get directly involved in that situation. What about you, Morgan?
I think I would definitely, I'm again direct. I used to be a little intimidated by this because I was physically scared, I think, of people, but we do not expect you guys to be like direct, like saving the world. Remember, your safety is very important to us, so that's why we have all these options. But now I am very comfortable being direct. I have been in direct situations where there was a guy asleep at the bar and I was like shaking him like, "Are you okay? You okay?" And his friends were like making fun of me, and eventually his dad ended up being there and was like, "He's fine." And there was only so much I could do. But after that, I was like, I was so embarrassed by that every other time that I've done it, it's been like nothing. I always tell people, if you have that 5 seconds of courage to save someone's life, but it's like 5 seconds that's embarrassing, like, all well. I know I had a girl, I walked back to her dorm. I thought it was a couple, but they weren't a couple. So I just went up to her and I directly said, "Hey, are you okay? Like, do you want me to walk you home?" And the guy said, "Oh, no, like, I got her. She's fine." She's like, "No, like, please walk me home." So I ended up walking her home. And I also kicked a guy who was asleep on the street, and he wasn't even from Athens. He had no idea where he was from. So I had to call his friend to pick him up. So I had, out of those 3 situations, one time I was super embarrassed, but the other 2, it made that one awkward situation made me more confident for the other times. So if you do directly get involved, you have our full support.
Yeah. And also remember that like being direct doesn't mean you're accusing anyone of anything. Like, it's not like you're going up to this person and say, "Hey, what are you going to do to this person?" That's not what we're saying at all. That's not the case. It's just like what Morgan was saying, asking if someone's okay. I've been in situations like that too. And also remember too, like, people are always like, "Well, what if it's their boyfriend or what if it's their girlfriend?" It doesn't matter. Consent is not something that's like, oh, since they've done something together before, that means that they forever have consent. It's on a every situation basis. So I would never just assume like, oh, there's a boy and a girl going upstairs, they're dating, it's fine. You have no idea. And we're not expecting you, like Morgan said, to like save the world, but just that one comment can really, really make an impact. And it's much better to get involved and say something than find out that something potentially happened because of that situation. But going off of that with delegating, I think kind of like what you were saying, Morgan, I know I've been in a situation where like people have been like laying on the street, like drunk or whatever. My first impulse is always they're drunk, always. Even now I can admit that. Anytime I see somebody passed out somewhere, I'm like, they're drunk. But that's not always the case. Sometimes maybe they fell, maybe they were hurt in some way, maybe they have a medical condition, maybe they just fell asleep. You're never going to know. In those cases, I think it's great to delegate. So if you think that they were harmed in some way, that would be calling the police or calling 911. In this situation, this kind of party that we're talking about, of these people going upstairs, maybe you saw one or both of those people talking to someone else earlier in the party, and you go up to them and say, "Hey, your friend's going upstairs with someone. I just want to make sure they're okay." That would be a great way to intervene and kind of just at least get a conversation about what's happening going. And then with distract, it actually in this scenario says that they're in your math class. So with this, I would totally go up to them like, "Hey, are you in my math class? Like, we should hang out. We should, whatever." And typically when people are drunk, distract is a little bit easier. You can, Morgan said earlier, like spill your drink, or, "Hey, you want to come to the bathroom with me?" That's a big thing for girls. Like, they go to the bathroom together, and that's a great way to get someone out of that scenario. And even if you're just getting them out of it long enough to have that conversation, like, "Hey, just want to make sure you're cool." And they're like, "Yep, I'm good." And then they can carry on with whatever they were doing. It doesn't need to be like a big scene where you're like getting angry or anything like that. It's just those little few questions of making sure that everyone involved is okay. They're really important because they can prevent something risky from happening. Alrighty, you want to move on to consent, Morgan?
Yeah. I would just say the last one, you could potentially delay.
Oh, yes, I
Just
forgot.
if
Thank you.
they are actually in your math class, you could just check it
Yeah.
up with them. This would be a situation where you could do that, but if you don't feel like you have to, because who knows what your relationship is with this person.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Sweet. So saving face, a lot of people, I've had groups where they have like fries as a scenario, and I know everyone's orientation was a little different this year. So some of you guys might have heard Jenny Hall Jones's Pizza Talk, and some of you may not, but it's kind of just addressing consent in different aspects. But for Power Gamma and Better Bystanders and all of OU, we kind of just have this saving face aspect. So whether you are going to engage in sex or any kind of sexual activity with your partner, we expect you to be fully conscious, acting freely, clear intent, and enthusiasm. So fully conscious is everyone is aware and awake. It's not like, oh, they are talking. They could be blacked out and still be talking, but fully conscious. I know the state of Ohio, you can be intoxicated and still give consent, but we encourage to be fully conscious. They're not asleep. They are not drunk. They are fully aware. Then acting freely, every party is acting free. This means that there is no money involved. There's no scenarios where someone's saying, well, if you love me, you'll do this for me. It's all acting freely of their own choice. Clear intent. So when it comes to hooking up, everyone has a different definition of what a hookup is. It could be a makeout. A hookup could be full vaginal sexual intercourse. It could be oral. It could be anal. I don't know. Everyone has a different way of hooking up. There are so many slang words that people have for sex or different sexual acts. So whatever your slang is, whatever you do, make sure all parties understand what is happening so that there is no confusion. And then enthusiasm. So we always say if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. So make sure that sex should be fun. Whatever it is, sex should be fun. It shouldn't be something that you are dreading or that you don't want to do. It should be fun. So keep those 4 things in mind, and then you will know that you have consent.
Yeah, I too.
Anything
I
else?
think, yeah, the only thing that I like to add is just one, paying attention to people's nonverbal cues. In the state of Ohio, you don't need verbal consent, but I think it can be, and of course, it can be difficult for some people, but visibly pulling away or something like that. Also, like receiving no, I think some people can get upset about that. And people have other ways of communicating that they don't want to have sex. So maybe someone will say, I'm really not feeling well. That's perfectly acceptable for them to say that. And they're communicating that they don't want to have sex with you. Or maybe they say, let's just watch a movie tonight, or let's just do this instead. Or, and all of those are kind of ways of saying no without directly saying no. And that's still a no. And that needs to be received well. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying those things. There's also nothing wrong with just saying, no, I don't want to. All of those things are okay. So, yeah, I think that was pretty much all we need for
There
consent,
is one point I forgot to say. You can have full consent, and then you can change your
Yeah.
mind. You can take away, if you decide you want to have sex with someone and then halfway through it you decide you don't want to anymore, you can take it away at any time. And again, repeating what Rachel said, accepting that no, even if it's halfway through, is very important.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty. So moving on to our last part. Alrighty. Morgan, do you want to kind of give a synopsis here of our next activity?
Sure. So what we usually do when we are in person is we have these little cards that we would give you throughout the story. But what I want you guys to do is really pay attention to everyone involved in this story. It's a story of a student at OU. It's a true story. It's a little dated, but it is true, and things like this do happen. So we're kind of addressed what could potentially happen in a risky situation and the people involved. So we just want to popcorn, Rachel?
Yeah. Do you want to start over on the left side or over here?
We can start right there.
On the right side. Okay, I can start.
Okay.
It was a typical spring day in Athens, Ohio. It had rained earlier in the day, but the weather had cleared. Bob, who lived on the third floor of McKinnon Hall, this is McKinnon Hall for those of you who probably don't know. It's on the south side of campus, kind of farther away actually from like Court Street and all of those areas. That kind of gives you a visual. He had made plans with his roommates and a good friend from high school who also lived in McKinnon to party hop that night. They had heard of a few off-campus parties.
Okay, so 10:20 p.m., Bob, his roommate, and friend left McKinnon Hall for an off-campus party on Mill Street. During the party, Bob drank beer from the keg for an hour and 20 minutes.
At 11:40 p.m., Bob and his friends left for another party on Congress Street. Bob drank more keg beer and did a couple of shots.
12:30 a.m., Bob and his friends went to a third party on West Washington Street. They drank more solo cups of beer.
1:10 a.m., a few people at the party saw Bob walking past the front window of the house.
1:30 a.m., when Bob's friends noticed he was gone, they searched the house and called his name outside several times. We just figured he went back to McKinnon, said one of Bob's friends.
At 2 a.m., Bob's roommate and friend got back to McKinnon Hall. Bob wasn't there. They went to bed.
In the early morning hours of Bob's disappearance, two women in an apartment complex just west of the site where Bob was last seen told investigators that an intoxicated male, watching Bob's description, walked in their apartment. One of the females reportedly gave him directions to the bike path.
5 p.m., when Bob did not return to his room by Sunday at 5 p.m., his roommate reported him missing. The Ohio University Police Department initiated an investigation into his whereabouts that day.
Ohio University police joined forces with Athens Police Department using additional agencies and family members to search for Bob.
Foot patrols, police dogs, boats, and air support searched for Bob for several days.
Canines located an unknown human scent in the Hocking River just under the Richland Avenue Bridge. Water rescue dives and river dredging teams scoured the hour. Wow, I cannot talk today. My bad. Scoured the area, and found nothing.
So just real quick to kind of give you a little bit of some context as to where this is all occurring. This is also on the south side of campus, well, kind of more like the southwest side, but it's pretty far from where Bob's dorm is. So it's like there's a bike path, and then there's his dorm, the bike path, probably at least a mile probably from the dorm. And then the bike path goes on for miles this way along the river. So this is all along the river off of the bike path, just to kind of give you a somewhat of a visual of where this is happening. OUPD continued to search along the banks of the Hocking River and the White Mills Dam area. 2 hours later, two students walking along the river saw a body and called 911.
2:45 p.m. Athens firefighters used grappling hooks to pull the body from Hocking River south bank.
At the time of his death, Bob's BAC was 0.24%, almost 2.5 times the state legal limit for driving. The Athens County coroner, Eric Hasmere, cited drowning as the primary cause of death and acute alcohol intoxication as the secondary.
The following is a statement Bob's dad made to the press. Students think that they're invincible, and they're not. This could happen to anyone.
Alrighty.
So this is our last little activity. So how did the story make you feel, Rachel?
You know, I think the first time I ever read this story, it wasn't really like, it didn't feel like real to me. There were a lot of things that I was like, oh, well, if they would have just called him, or if they would have just not went to bed and assumed where he was. And then I was thinking like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what went wrong here. There were a lot of people that could have intervened in this situation. And that's not to say that it's their fault that this happened. and there were a lot of reasons why they didn't intervene, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think now that, unfortunately, I've seen more of these issues happen on campus throughout my college experience, I realize that it is something that can happen. It's not common, of course, and I hope it never does happen, but there are instances of alcohol-related deaths. I also think this story is kind of interesting to point out that alcohol intoxication was not the cause of death. So this person did not die because they were too drunk. They died because of the result of something that happened because they were drunk. So I think it's kind of assumed that maybe they fell or were injured in some way and kind of, fell into the river that way. And there have been other instances at different colleges of this happening where people walk alone and they fall and they, just there's no way for them to help themselves because they're alone. So when we ask why do you think that no one took an active role in helping Bob, what do you think, Morgan?
I think it kind of builds on the fact that you just said, like, it wasn't the reason he died was not alcohol. It was the secondary cause. So he could have been at 0.24 his entire, like, he could have been at 0.24 so many times before and no one thought anything of it because he ended up fine. So everyone kind of just assumed he was fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of assumptions were made. And if you look back in the story, I think, when I first read this, I was like, why did they just assume where he was? Like, why didn't they go look for him? Especially when they didn't report him missing until 5 p.m. the next day. I would definitely, if you hadn't seen your roommate, I probably would have reported them missing when I got home, especially in this day and age when we have our phones and we have things like that. If you have like Find My Friends and you look at Find My Friends and their phone is off and you can't find them anywhere, I would definitely report that immediately. And I think technology is powerful in that way that we can kind of get a hold of people. And that's kind of our cue that something can be wrong if we can't get a hold of them in some way. So definitely, I think that's the reason that no one took an active role. Let's see what else. Oh, like the people that directed him to the bike path, they maybe just thought he was lost. They might have not even known he was drunk. They might have just thought that he was lost and he was kind of on the right side of campus. And it's confusing on that side of campus, definitely, to navigate back there. So the bike path, they thought, okay, that's a straight shot, and then, just go straight up and he'll get there kind of thing. So I think lots of assumptions were made in the process.
I agree. And then, have you and or your friends ever been in a risky situation like Bob? So just reflect on this yourself and your activity. And I don't know, Rachel, have you been in a situation like this?
Kind of. I've definitely had situations where I've like I said earlier, I've found people that were kind of by themselves that were clearly way too drunk. I actually had a friend who was in a situation like this who she saw two people outside of the bar, and it was a boy and a girl, and the boy was really frantic and she was like, what's going on? And he was like, I just got kicked out of the bar because they thought that we were dating, but I don't know her at all. And she can't talk to me. I can't get into her phone. I don't know, where she's from or where she lives or anything. So my friend ended up helping figure out where she lived and get her home. But that's a situation where, like, if somebody wouldn't have stepped in, who knows how long she would have been sitting out there, by herself and clearly over intoxicated. So there's definitely situations like this. We're not saying that this is something that happens like every single time you walk down Court Street. Of course not. But it does happen, and that's kind of why we want to give you the tools that you need to intervene in a situation like this.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like, I've had situations where a girl fell and her blood, me and my friend had to carry her because her blood was all over us. It was gross. We had to call. I've had situations where, again, I walk people home, but there's also situations where I've been in risky situations with my friends prior to knowing this stuff, and we didn't know what to do. Like, I've had my friends get very ill. I've had a friend have a seizure, and we didn't know what to do because of alcohol poisoning. And we were not educated, and we didn't know what to do, so we did not make the right choices. And I think that is the scary part, is not knowing what to do. And if you look at other schools, and just looking at the deaths that have occurred, just 0.24, there's been deaths higher than that with the BAC and lower than that. And
definitely.
just I always emphasize being self-aware and being aware of others is huge, huge, huge in college. So I hope people use these tools. Again, it's not always ends badly. These are the little red dots in the big blue.
Right.
But it can be fun. It can be celebratory. It can be so many good memories. But we just want people to be safe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I do not have anything else to add. I would say if you are interested in getting involved in Power Gamma or Better Bystanders or Pure Health Education, you can reach out to our email that you will definitely have communicated with you. If you have any questions about any of the content that we covered, also feel free to email us. We really hope that this kind of gave you some information that will probably especially be really helpful when you all come back to campus. We're really excited for when that can happen. But in the meantime, please stay safe and make smart decisions. Even when you're at home, all of that still matters. So yeah, anything else to add, Morgan?
I don't think so. Just if you can, fill out the post-assessment, and then if you guys do have an assignment, give it to whoever you need to do for that. And you guys are good.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for watching.
Thank you, everyone.
Stop recording.